From North America's greatest opper to Valorant's most hated player.
No, Wardell's actually for this, I'm sorry.
Wardell has had a memorable and turbulent professional and personal career in Valorant, with him at one point being the face of the esport, then retiring and building a successful Twitch stream to only losing it all because of one mistake. Of course, we know all the clips and highlights, but was Wardell actually one of the best in the game during his prime, or was it all just overblown hype? Well, I dived into and analyzed his old games during both his peak with TSM, but also with every other team he played on during his 3-year pro career in Valorant, to extract every stat I could to see the whole picture of the player Wardell used to be. But I need to ask you one thing. You need to subscribe and possibly even turn on notifications if you really like the videos, as I won't stop making videos like this one all throughout the pro season, so you don't want to miss out. So before we truly look at Wardell's Valorant journey, we have to look at where he started his pro gaming career. And like most of the early greats of Valorant, he had been cutting his teeth in CSGO for years prior. First joining a competitive team when he was 17 in 2016 with B's Money Crew, before he joined Ghost Gaming, where he got the most exposure to top talent in the NA region, with him finishing in the top 8 at the ESL Season 8 finals in 2018, with him turning heads with his skill on the op. But only a year and a half later, his once promising career in CS looked to have disappeared, as he was dropped from Ghost in mid-2019 after a string of group stage knockouts and lower tournaments, as his ESL performance might be looking like a ceiling, with him playing Orgless for almost a year and a half before the opportunity that would save his esports career arrived in Riot's newest game, Valorant. Wardell, like a lot of the other NA talent that had been struggling in Counter-Strike, decided to jump ship and try to see if they could make a new name for themselves in the more fast-paced FPS. And from the beginning, it was clear that Wardell was built for this game. His tendencies that would have been punished in the more boots-on-the-ground CS was rewarded in the more dynamic Valorant, as right away he stuck to the duelist role, as it allowed his natural opping ability to continue, especially with agents like Reyna and Phoenix that had abilities that were completely unlike anything in the previous esport. But the agent that he was really drawn to was the high-flying, knife-dashing duelist, Jett, who early on seemed like the natural agent to use when trying to op at the highest level. So quickly Wardell and Jett became attached at the hip, as he caught eyes during his streams, quickly building a fan base due to his crazy ranked antics and gameplay, all the way to his first pro tournament in the region with Mousespaz, where he filled out a team with other pro CSGO players looking for a new start, as he was joined by Hazed, Subroza, and Drone. But right away in these early matches, it seemed like there were players that didn't translate well to this new game and others that did. And for Wardell, it fit perfectly, as he just lit up players that would have defeated him just a year earlier. They ended up winning their second tournament they competed in, which caught the attention of one of the biggest orgs in North America at the time. So while so many major orgs were picking up all the other talented rosters, TSM decided they liked what they saw in Wardell and the rest of his team, and took over the roster from Mousespaz as they exited the esports, launching all these players back to a respectable level in this new esport, with also those same expectations to follow, as the region started to become more and more clear as they played more invitationals against other newly formed teams on orgs like Cloud9, Gen G, and T1. And during these 2 months of invitational matches before any Riot organized tournament happened, TSM started to build a reputation for being a top 3 team in the region, with them going 56-12, with them winning 7 grand finals to already be one of the most decorated teams in North America. And while this was still in the stone age of Valorant and a lot of VODs and stats had been lost to time, he put in insane numbers as Jett, being considered possibly one of the best in the world with the game only being out 2 months already, with him even diffing 10s when they first met while he was still playing on Cloud9. So when the North American First Strike event was announced by Riot, Wardell and TSM were automatically considered one of the favorites to take home the trophy. But of course, this was the very first event of real importance, and there's no way of knowing how teams will do when matches truly matter, especially as a lot of these players on these new top Valorant teams have had previous history not living up to their expectations, which is why they moved away from that stagnating career in that former game to Valorant. So this first strike event would be the Wild West, as Wardell needed to continue to prove himself and bring his team far to truly establish his legacy early in this esport. So after a grueling open and close qualifier that saw them fight through all sorts of teams, Wardell and TSM qualified after beating FaZe Clan in the grand finals, with them and the other top 7 teams in North America having to fight it out in single elimination bracket to be crowned number 1. And they came out with one of the best matches against Renegade, with Wardell going 19-3 on Ascent, while Subroza made this spot on the map legendary, with his insane raise play that sometimes resulted in him overheating with his ult, now known as a Rosa ult. But with this dominant win, they were now faced off against a pre-Ye Envy that is led by FNS along with Crashies and Victor. Earlier in the season, they faced off, but it was razor thin, so Wardell and TSM needed to put on a performance to remember to survive and make it to the grand finals, where waiting for them is already a great 100 Thieves team that just looks unstoppable, with the biggest name players filling their roster. They started the match on Ascent, where Wardell didn't have the best game on Jet, but did his job as entry, shutting down Envy's Reyna all throughout the map. But Drone ended up being the difference maker as he picked up 6 first kills on Phoenix to win Ascent 13-7 to put FNS and his team on the back foot, with him needing to rebound on Split. But this is where we see the golden era of the most powerful 1-2 punch in North America at the time, as Wardell and Subroza worked off each other perfectly as they gave their team a 9-3 defending side and survived the curse before anyone even called it a 9-3 curse, as they eliminated a solid Envy team that were then forced to reevaluate their roster after losing here, eventually actually switching from Caboose and Mame for Ye and Marved, and they would end up going on to win as Optic less than 2 years later from now. But in this moment, this was Wardell and Subroza's time in the spotlight, as they are now one match away from taking the first Strike event and being able to call themselves the best in NA during the inaugural season of Valorant. But after losing on map 1 in overtime and losing 13-11 on Bind, it looked all but over, as even though they won their favorite map of Ascent, they finally fell to 100 Thieves in convincing fashion 13-7 to finish in second place. So close, but 100 Thieves looked to be the better and more consistent team, with Asuna looking like the best new player now, and Hiko seeming to rejuvenated his career with Steel as IGL. And it was ultimately just a much too hard team for Wardell and TSM to overcome, even as he put up great stats overall. But while the loss was hard, this established Wardell as a top 2 Jet player in the region now, as he looked otherworldly on the op against anyone he faced up against, putting him at the 4th highest ACS. He also picked up a 1.37 KD against the top teams in the region, with one of the best first kills to deaths for any entry player at 26 and 14. And with those stats and promise that he and the rest of the TSM had shown, they were ready to face the first real season of Valorant, with them gunning to make challengers, where they might have a chance to make one of the international events and make a name for themselves. But this would kind of be Wardell's peak as a Valorant player, as they were unable to regain the success they had in early 2020 and struggled to keep up with the changing meta that shifted away from the 2 to 3 duelist meta, where the whole goal in a round was kind of to take duels and hope your aim wins out, and instead switch to a more strategic playstyle, relying on util combos. But the team didn't really fit all these new roles easily, as while he continued to fry on Jet with the op, the overall team suffered as they fell out of the first 2 qualifiers and then barely qualify at the end after defeating a Vanity and Zelsis-led version 1. And they showed some promise in the main event where 4 spots were up to make the regional masters, defeating Gen G with a roster that kind of looked like they were figuring out their comps a lot better. And with them one match away from qualifying and restating themselves at the top of the region, they faced off against Luminosity. But just like in the first Strike event, Wardell played well, but his team couldn't get the job done yet again, missing out on glory as they fell to an elimination match against the same 100 Thieves team that defeated them in the grand finals. And this time it wasn't close, as 100 Thieves embarrassed them on Icebox and dashed their hopes for Masters on Ascent, as they fell one match away. And while they were able to make it to stage 2 challengers with Wardell still looking impressive, with him putting up a 241 ACS and a great first kill to death ratio at 26-16, they couldn't kit Bass Ambox that saw the rise of El Diablo, as even though Wardell defeated Ye in their own personal Jet duel, the team around him wasn't good enough to survive elimination, finishing in 6th. And for their qualification for Masters Berlin, with their last chance as a roster before things might be changed up over the off-season, they're able to fight well, forcing a map 3 against a Ye-led Envy, with Wardell actually going head-to-head against him yet again and winning out on Breeze, but couldn't finish the job on the deciding map, as they fell to elimination against a good Rise team that was building around everyone's favorite EG fan now, Shanks. But even though Wardell yet again had a solid individual game, the team as a whole couldn't break through to survive, as they finished in 8th to end their 2021 season, failing to make any real noise all season, with the stock of Wardell and the rest of TSM continuing to fall lower and lower, after being ranked the first #1 team in North America in June of 2020. But also during his decline, there were a lot of changes to the agent meta that could have affected him, as his favorite agent, Jet, was getting severe nerfs, dating all the way back to just after his peak. And with one of the biggest nerfs coming to Jet towards the end of 2021 to eliminate her Insta-Dash, Wardell was now in danger, as he needed to adjust on the fly before the next season, or risk being left behind, especially as TSM looked to make changes in their roster to finally regain the prominence they had at the beginning of the game. as they pretty much gutted the team, leaving only Subroza and Wardell as the lone survivors to have a new team built around them. But that was when it seemed like Wardell's prayers were answered, as after losing his best opping agent to nerfs, he was granted the perfect weapon that could incentivize more of it. He was entering the infamous chamber meta that would cast a cloud on the entire season. But for Wardell, he jumped at the opportunity to play him over Jett, as he played well in his first few open qualifiers matches on him. But quickly the honeymoon phase wore off against better teams, as he's just started to look more and more average as the qualifiers continued, with him putting up impressive stat lines like 246 ACS with a 1.6 KD and a 95 to 48 first kill to death ratio throughout the qualifiers, exclusively playing chamber. And while it was clear that switching to chamber was great individually for him against weaker opponents, there still seemed to be something lacking in his game as well as in his team, where he could get kills and have flashes of greatness, but would end up losing easy team rounds against teams that had no business being on the same server, with them failing to make it out of the qualifiers in stage 1, playing even worse than they did a year before, when they were already so disappointing. With people thinking it wasn't just everyone else's fault on the previous TSM team, but rather the two poster boys, as after 2 years of competing on TSM, Wardell left the team before stage 2, ending his 2022 season without even playing in Challenger's main event, with his pro career in real jeopardy, as more and more talented and hungry players were sprouting up and debuting every day at the time. So this is when he decided to step back from trying to compete at the highest level anymore, and focus more on his live streams as he gained more and more traction due to his loud personality and infectious mood, as he became a fan favorite for a lot of NA viewers. And while he continued to grow his presence as a full-time content creator and streamer going into 2023, he still had aspirations and hope to make a comeback, as giving up being pro in something is hard, especially since he's been doing it since he was 17. So along with some former CSGO friends and old teammates, he created The Nation. And right away, every match was must watch as he tried to qualify for challengers, but it wasn't to be, as they ended up falling out of the open qualifiers early, with this being a clear message for Wardell and the other players that were trying to make a comeback / breakthrough like Stewie2K and Brax, that their time now might be better used for other ventures or games. As Wardell hasn't tried to play in challengers since then, as he just continues to focus on growing his Twitch channel and YouTube, which leads right into the downfall of Wardell, not just as a player, but rather as a personality and streamer for Valorant, now being considered one of the most hated people in the esport. That is all because of stream sniping and gaslighting poor little Tarek. In a match, Wardell duoed with a known stream sniper, and made it pretty obvious that they were stream sniping while playing against Tarek. When confronted about this, Wardell lied and gaslit him by saying that he was actually playing with the Omen rather than the stream sniping Reyna. And even after all that, what really lit the fire that would burn down his reputation and career in Valorant was him saying that Tarek was actually just asking to be stream sniped because he didn't add a delay. Crazy mental hoops to jump through to take the blame off yourself and put it on your victim. But with that, the momentum behind him completely fell off, with even his most diehard fans moving on from him, with him now not only past his pro Valorant peak, but also now past his content / streaming peak. So I can't predict what will happen to Wardell, but we will always have the 2020 TSM days with him frying on the op to look back fondly on. Check out the recent Exafrag episode, where we dive into the huge problems for some of the biggest teams like NRG and Sentinels. It's so interesting, so you don't want to miss out. Also, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, so you don't miss a single video throughout the rest of the Valorant season.